Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the University of Manchester Middle East Centre's online webinar on an MBA for an Uncertain Future by Xavier Duran, our Programme Director for the MBA programme. My name is William Walsh. I'm part of the Middle East Centre's team, and I have various roles here, including being a Programme Counsellor for the MBA programme. I will be moderating the questions box and the chat box during this session, so please feel free to send us any questions across, and we'll try to answer as many of them as possible towards the end of the session once we have a bit of time to go through a Q&A discussion with Xavier as well. And before we get into the presentation, I'd like to, of course, introduce Xavier to you all. So Xavier Duran is the Director of MBA Programmes at Alliance Manchester Business School, part of the University of Manchester, of course. Xavier provides leadership and management support on academic, delivery and programme development issues for the Global MBA. He also advises on and manages projects that contribute to improving the student experience, and he's also a workshop tutor in managerial economics, strategy and competition, and business simulation modules, which are available, of course, on the MBA program. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome Xavier to the session, and over to you.
Okay, thank you, William. And I hope I just activated the camera, so I hope that you guys can all see me. As William said, my name is Xavier Duran, and I am the MBA Programs Director at Alliance Manchester Business School here at the University of Manchester. And in essence, what my role entails is having oversight over all academic and otherwise issues in our portfolio of MBA programs. So that is, I look after our full-time MBA programs, in essence, our students all over the world coming over for around 18 months here to Manchester to take their MBAs in campus, really, from every September. But indeed, as well, I have oversight over all our portfolio of part-time MBA programs. That is our global MBA, and indeed as well the accelerated pathways that we have in our global MBA. So that is the finance accelerated MBA for holders of professional finance and accounting qualifications that allows them to complete their MBA a wee bit, and also our global accelerated MBA for applicants that might be interested perhaps on expediting their MBA and doing it into a period of 18 months, but as a close cohort that tends to travel all over the world, and indeed that tends to be incredibly senior. So we're actually looking at people that have at least 8-10 years experience, but generally speaking, we're looking at people that tend to have around 20-25 year experience with substantial managerial experience and seniority. I also look after our MBAs, which in some jurisdictions we actually offer in partnership with other universities around the world. So obviously we also have the Kelley-Manchester MBA that I'm going to be touching upon a tiny bit a bit later on. So it's a joint MBA that we offer together with the Kelley School of Business, part of Indiana University in the United States, and indeed as well with Fundação Getúlio Vargas in Sao Paulo, and indeed Tongji University in China, in Shanghai. And indeed, whilst I can reply to absolutely any question you may have on the MBA, and I believe that William will actually be really moderating a Q&A session at the end of my session, which will take somewhere around 40-45 minutes. What I wanted to do today is I wanted to focus on looking at how really an MBA can create value for its holders in the context of a very, very uncertain environment. Because without saying that this uncertainty, strong as it may have been 7 or 8 months ago, now it's really maximized with our current COVID-19 pandemic. And even on a post-COVID world, this uncertainty and the dynamism of our current business environment is actually likely to be accelerated. So for the next 40 or 45 minutes, as I said, I will be making the point, or I hope to make the point and put it across, that being a generalist business and management qualification, an MBA, or should I say a constantly evolving MBA is perfectly suited more than before. So pre-COVID, or indeed a few years ago, it really doesn't matter. It's incredibly well suited to providing graduates the right skills and knowledge, not only to navigate through uncertainty, but to thrive in it. And that's very, very important. I don't want you to think that an MBA is a qualification that will allow you to, you know what, model through, navigate all the complexity that this new world will be creating. No, but it will actually allow you to thrive in it. It will make you embrace uncertainty. It will actually make you embrace the opportunities that come about an uncertain future. In particular, I will actually focus on 5 different skills that we tend to build on all our graduates. I'll speak about communications, collaboration, creativity, critical thinking, and most importantly, in my opinion, I will actually be speaking also about confidence, how an MBA gives you confidence. So I'm going to switch off my camera because I want to make sure that you can actually see the slides properly, because there will be some certain level of detail. And what I will do is, once I finish with the actual presentation, William will be moderating a panel of questions and answers that you might want to pose on the chat box, and he'll be asking them or collating them, and I'll make myself available on the camera and meet you all again. So thanks for attending, and I hope you enjoy this presentation for the next 40 minutes or so. So I've already introduced myself, just to perhaps give you a bit more in terms of the agenda, and just to provide you a bit of an overview. I will begin with a quick overview of Alliance Manchester Business School and the University of Manchester, before we actually then move on to explore what an MBA is, the historical evolution of the program, and how its generality, how its broadness as a program makes it ideal for individuals wishing not only, as I said, to navigate, but to thrive in that context of uncertainty. Remember, that's the focus of today's talk. We will then focus on the skills the MBAs require to thrive in this uncertainty. As I already mentioned, I want to focus particularly on communications, on collaboration, on creativity, on critical thinking, and possibly, and most importantly, confidence. Only then I will draw on our experience of building these skills in our MBA programs across the board. So whether that's the full-time MBA, but obviously for the interest of all of you attending this webinar, particularly on our part-time MBAs, the Global MBA, the Global Accelerated, and the Kelley-Manchester MBA here at the University of Manchester, by giving you a brief overview of our programs before I actually then conclude the webinar and open the floor, as I said, to some questions. So let's get it started. And first of all, let me speak a bit at an institutional level. So let me tell you a bit more about the University of Manchester, and indeed Alliance Manchester Business School. So created in 1824, as you can see here in the slide, and with more than 43,000 students and 12,000 staff. University of Manchester, as you can imagine, is a very, very large institution. It is indeed the largest campus-based university in the United Kingdom. Our world-class research puts us amongst one of the leading research institutions in the world in many fields of study. And we count up to 25 Nobel Prizes among students and staff throughout our history. So very, very proud history that our institution has. Alliance Manchester Business School is part of the University of Manchester and was one of the first 2 business schools created in the United Kingdom back in 1965. So we celebrated our 50th anniversary a few years ago now. We are what we call a full-service business school, offering programs at undergraduate, postgraduate, and doctoral levels, in addition to executive education and obviously the area that I look after, our MBAs. We also produce world-leading research and have connections with commercial and non-commercial organizations globally. You name a big company, we have a connection there of some kind, either through an established partnership or perhaps via connections that we might have with current students or alumni. But we also have very, very strong connections with the not-profit sector, may that be NGOs, may that be not-for-profit organizations, and so on. In terms of our MBA, just to let you know that it is triply accredited. So it's accredited by the AACSB, an accreditation body from the United States, the EFMD from the European Union, really, and the Association of MBAs. And that makes us a member of the selected group of less than 1% of business schools in the world with what we call this triple crown. So in other words, there's not many business schools that are accredited by three bodies. But in addition to all these features, the University of Manchester also has 5 global centers from which we deliver our global MBA program, and where we actually host our full-time MBA students to gain international exposure. So Singapore, Shanghai, Sao Paulo, Hong Kong, obviously Manchester, and then it goes without saying, because we're being hosted today by the center, is our Middle East Center, which is actually located in Dubai Knowledge Park in Dubai. Right? And we've actually been operating from Dubai now nearly for 15 years. Dubai is indeed actually one of our largest centers supporting the global MBA. It's actually the largest center after Manchester in itself. So we have, as I'm sure you already know, plenty of alumni in Dubai, but indeed in the wider Gulf and Middle East region. And not only we actually have exposure via centers that we have in these locations with our own staff, with our own space, but we also actually from time to time even host some of our global MBA students at different locations. A few years ago, for example, we ran some of our electives out of Washington, D.C. in the United States. Just before the pandemic, we were actually hosting some of our negotiation skills classes in Tokyo. And it is not that in these places we actually have a center per se, just as we do in Singapore, in Dubai, in Shanghai, in Sao Paulo, in Singapore, in Manchester. But we actually from time to time like offering our students further possibilities to travel to new locations, to go to different places where they can actually take some of the elective workshops. So that's actually something that our students tend to value quite robustly. So in any case, also to mention that 89% of our students tend to come from outside of the UK. That goes without saying, being such a global program. We have over 100 nationalities represented in our program. Pretty much the vast majority of countries in the world. And what's very nice about our program, and it's no coincidence that we call it a global program, is the fact that, as I just suggested, we actually give all our students the opportunity to study electives from our overseas centers. Now you might be wondering, but hang on a second, I'm thinking of joining the program in January. There's a pandemic. How could I go to other centers? Usually our electives happen on the second year of a 2-year program. So it goes without saying that in 2 years' time, it's actually quite likely that things are going to be a lot better, and you'll be able to avail of those opportunities to go to our international centers. We're actually already seeing some relaxation, for example, in China, where there's absolutely no restrictions to our students being able to go to our center. Hong Kong and Singapore just opened up this week an air bridge amongst each other so that they can actually even just start visiting different centers. And hopefully that's going to be the case as well for other centers in Manchester, our Dubai center, in Sao Paulo, and so on. We just can't wait to see you physically, really. In any case, let me just perhaps now focus a bit more on the real substance of this webinar that we're having today, which is looking at what is the value of an MBA in this context of uncertainty. So you might be wondering, what is an MBA? Well, beyond the obvious, so obviously a Master of Business Administration, an MBA is a generic business and management qualification that gives graduates a holistic and synthetic overview of how organizations work, and how we manage within them. Now, far from making students specialists on any subject area, like masters in science, for example, do, in the case of an MSc in economics, or an MSc in operations, or an MSc in accounting, or an MSc in finance, or an MSc in marketing, in HRM, and so on. The MBA instead gives students an understanding of all different organizational functions. So it makes you understand what all those functions, department, all those different people and stakeholders within the organization do. Anything from marketing to operations to accounting to finance to HR, we cover it all. Yet, we don't cover it in as much detail as you would in an MSc, where you're actually just looking at one very, very specific area of knowledge. This is what we call, again, a broad, a general management qualification, where you're trying to see the big picture. And it's only once you actually have an understanding of that big picture, it is only once you have an understanding of all the different areas, functions, departments within an organization, that you can then bring them together with what we call a strategy course to give you that helicopter view of the organization and the links between those different functions, so that you're in a position to devise and implement strategy at the highest level. As the MBA, let me focus perhaps a bit more on the type of issues that you might be looking at in terms of careers outlets, which is usually what our students value the most. And simply to mention perhaps that most of the historical reasons why people are motivated to do an MBA are usually really down to professional motivations, and include, for instance, the fact that the MBA is a great platform if you have reached a plateau in your career and want to move, for instance, from a technical role into management. This is a typical example of engineers or people who have been pigeonholed into very specific jobs within their organizations and would like to get some training to get them to more managerial positions, to more synthetic positions, really. Also, many MBA applicants are looking to shift sector or to shift locations, perhaps. In that sense, a good MBA will be designed to allow sufficient time and structure to explore careers options. The MBA does indeed provide a reflective juncture for students to prepare for their next move. The MBA also develops professional and networks really that will stay with all the graduates for a lifetime. But there are other reasons, perhaps not so widely spoken about, why people actually really are motivated in doing MBAs. So the MBA, for instance, is an excellent way to formalize otherwise experiential knowledge. So we have plenty of people that come into the MBA with a very, very substantial experience. Sometimes people even in their 50s. I remember actually, even a couple of years ago, we got a couple of ladies from Hong Kong in their 60s. They did not know each other. We thought, do they know each other? No, but it was actually quite interesting. They were highly experienced and senior individuals, but they had never had a formal training in business or management. Actually, some of them had never even gone to college. They had actually built a business from the ground up, and perhaps a more mature or middle age, they had found themselves perhaps yearning for that formalization of what they already consider to be a lot of experiential knowledge, and they wanted to do an MBA simply to get that gravitas, to get that credibility that allow them to perhaps support with perhaps more formalized training what they already thought they knew, or at least to see whether they had been doing it properly. So indeed, many experienced individuals may wish to pursue an MBA to solidify their experience with a rigorous qualification. Also, is the fact that MSCs are commonplace in some markets. And obviously, the MBA as a qualification will allow them to differentiate themselves from peers. Finally, another of those perhaps not so widely spoken about reasons as to why people might like doing MBAs is the fact that we increasingly see entrepreneurial or innovative applicants onto our MBAs. We don't look for people who recite what is in a book. We're looking for people to create new ideas and willing to test them. The MBA indeed provides people with an excellent platform to explore and test that new venture idea and to gain insight on how to bring these to market and how to finance them. So it's no surprise that courses like entrepreneurship and innovation management or venture capital and private equity are among some of our most popular elective units. We have plenty of entrepreneurs or people that might want to eventually set up their own business as a result of their MBA journey, really. Now, regardless of what is exact motivation to do an MBA, every applicant, in my opinion, will be looking to transform his or her personal and professional career, ultimately. Now, historically, the first MBA was offered back in 1908 by Harvard. So MBAs as qualifications have actually been around for a long time, really. As the MBA qualification gained popularity since the early 1900s, particularly in the United States and subsequently in Europe in the 1960s and the 1970s, it began attracting attention in different parts of the world and amongst new audiences. In this context, MBA programs, particularly in Europe, became more diverse with students recruited from different parts of the world and increasingly with global curricula. Now, it was actually in the 1990s that we actually witnessed, particularly in the MBA world, the proliferation of new part-time MBA delivery formats that catered for new audiences of working professionals wishing to do their MBAs, but who were not willing to put their careers and their lives on hold to do full-time programs. So in essence, up to the 1990s, the vast majority of MBA programs had been offered on a full-time basis. But there was more and more demand from working professionals who wanted to get an MBA qualification as well without compromising their own career advancements. Now, obviously, these new delivery formats also opened up new markets, particularly in some regions and countries initially in Asia, as Asia was actually starting to come of age. So the precursor of the Manchester Global MBA, as it happened, started to be delivered actually back in the early 1990s. We were one of the first MBA providers in the world, really, to be providing, at the time, what was called a distance learning MBA at scale. And we actually did so with centers in Singapore and Hong Kong as early on as 1992. And we were actually, at the time, delivering in places like Zimbabwe, Jamaica, and then obviously we had also some corporate MBAs at the time in parts of India. We also had it with some of the big four in the United States, and so on. But really, it was in the late 1990s when the ubiquity of the internet and its inroads into education facilitated the explosion of online and blended or hybrid, as they call them in the United States, MBA delivery formats and programs, that the vast majority of MBAs offered in a part-time basis to working professionals really started to be proliferating all over the world. These continue to disrupt the traditional markets for full-time MBAs. Actually, to this day, more and more people seem to be wanting to do their MBAs as professionals. And it's actually quite interesting because much had been, and I've noticed I'm actually speaking now in past tense, because obviously that perhaps predates a bit COVID. That's obviously become a very important juncture on our lives, and certainly as well with higher education. But much had been commented just before the COVID-19 pandemic about the potential reduced interest in MBAs as a qualification. And indeed, this may have been the case if one focused only on full-time programs and only in the United States alone. The amount of applications to full-time MBA programs had certainly gone down in the United States. And business schools were actually scrambling there to recruit students from a smaller pool of applicants. Many MBA programs in the United States had been closing for, I would say, around 2 or 3 years as competition from students became stronger and stronger and stronger. However, that headline only hit most of the story. One of the key reasons why applications for full-time MBAs in the United States had decreased was because of a quick proliferation of online and hybrid or blended programs. Poets and Quants, an expert organization on the MBA world really, estimates over 300 online MBAs are now offered in the United States alone. And these are the ones that are actually cannibalizing full-time programs. Another reason obviously includes the effects of more stringent visa regulation in the United States, and perhaps the perception that the United States is not as welcoming a country to foreign citizens as it had been in the past. The Trump effect. So as it happens, we've actually seen in Europe that whilst the applications for full-time MBA programs in the United States, the more traditional market, had actually really plunged, we were actually increasing our applications in our full-time MBA programs because there was people from other parts of the world that would have, in normal circumstances, gone to the United States for their MBAs that were no longer doing it simply because they were not feeling as though they could move to the United States. And even those applicants in the United States, so there's a large number of people in the United States, more so than other parts of the world to this stage, that are in business and that really need an MBA. An MBA perhaps is a lot more commonplace in the United States than it is at the moment in other parts of the world. But many of these individuals that would have, even as US citizens, done MBAs at the time in their own home country, were starting to do them part-time via online or hybrid methodologies. Data from the General Management Admissions Council, GMAC really, which I show in this slide, reveals the drop in application from the United States, particularly by non-US students who seem to be choosing to go to Europe or to one of the fast-growing Asian business schools. In essence, overall applications for part-time or full-time MBA worldwide were actually not decreasing, they were increasing quite rapidly actually, even before the pandemic. And this phenomenon, we believe, will actually be exacerbated with the pandemic itself. We actually notice that in times of uncertainty, people want to bank on education to make themselves a bit more sellable. And there's no better program to make yourself sellable than an MBA because of that generality, because of that broadness. It does not give you training on one specific industry. It gives you very versatile skills and knowledge that you can actually use to move to more synthetic roles that indeed can actually apply to any different areas of business and management, really. So people continue to want to do MBAs, just in different ways or in different places. And as technology increasingly permeates wider areas of our personal and professional lives, and that we hear a significant proportion of the jobs we will be doing in 20 years' time are not yet invented, we will need to change careers a number of times over our professional lives. Therefore, instead of suggesting that these changes herald really a decrease in the popularity of the MBA qualification, quite the opposite. I would contend that they actually strengthen its relevance. Being a broad business and management qualification, as I keep saying, the MBA provides a holistic, synthetic overview of how organizations work, or how they ought to work, and how we actually manage within them. So whilst this synthetic approach may be mainly framed around the context of the current business environment, the focus on adaptive skills coupled with the critical mindset these programs instill into their students contribute to making MBAs very forward-looking and are ultimately, in my opinion, the reason for its resilience as a qualification. Programs rise and fall in popularity. The MBA has been there for well over 100 years, and it continues to be very strong. Why? Because it's general, because it's broad, because it gives you those versatile skills that allow you to use them at any point in your career, to change career, to go to different industries, to move upwards, to move sideways, you name it. So, what attributes do business leaders require to thrive in a context of uncertainty. Now, what skills do business leaders require? How can an MBA build those skills? Now, to begin with, I would argue that to thrive in an uncertainty or in a context of uncertainty, business leaders need to have a global outlook. They need to be mobile. And by that, I mean they need to be ready to take up positions in other locations. Leaders also need to be and act in a socially responsible manner. In that sense, integrity is key. So being opportunistic is bound to break trust, which in its turn will limit potential in the long run. But, and again, in my opinion, most importantly, business leaders need to be versatile. And that is particularly important in an uncertain business environment. They need to be agile and adaptable to make the most out of the opportunities generated by this change. So let me focus on that versatility. And this is where that broadness, where that generality about the MBA as a qualification comes in. What skills can the MBA provide to make business leaders versatile? In my opinion, as I already mentioned a couple of times during the introduction, business leaders need to build communications, collaboration, creativity, and critical thinking skills. Also, and probably most importantly, I will get to this point in a moment, business leaders must be confident. Let me very, very briefly speak about each one of those skills. Let me speak about communications, collaboration, creativity, and critical thinking. Speak about confidence in the next slide. So communication, what do we actually mean by developing communication skills? So in that sense, I'm speaking about anything from getting you to be able to present publicly, to be able to network, sometimes even just being able to do some chit chat at the networking event. So how do you actually make yourself friendly when you don't know anybody at the networking event? How do you actually really come up with what we call an elevator pitch? Also, how do we go about, for example, negotiating with others, may that be a commercial deal or perhaps even our own wages? How do we go about communicating virtually? So there has traditionally been a lot of emphasis on communicating face-to-face, but now this pandemic has just shown us how important it is that we also, for example, ascribe by some virtual etiquette of communication. So for example, I'm chatting to you on GoTo or on Zoom or on Teams. Why do we actually need to mute everybody so that a speaker can actually put a message through? How do we go about then making a point relevant, succinct, and really valid? Those are the type of things that we actually look at in terms of communication. And we develop your communication skills through a mix of curricular and non-curricular or extracurricular activity. So we do it via our own course units, or indeed via our career service teams or extracurricular events that we actually do, either in Manchester or that we actually host at our center. So for example, the Middle East Center in Dubai tend to be quite active at putting events together for our students and graduates. How about collaboration? Here, I'm not only speaking about collaborating in terms of being a good team player, but perhaps it's also about getting you to think about the benefits of delegation, how you go about leading a team, or how you go about collaborating, for instance, to finance your own business venture. So for example, issues like crowdsourcing and so on, they're all different forms of collaboration. Creativity is to do with the fact that what we want you to do is not to be machines. We don't want you to be robots. We want you as humans to be able to come up with new ideas. We want you to come up with strategy. We want you to be looking at the world from different perspectives. We want you to do those things that the computer will never do. This is ultimately those type of jobs that will never be automatized. And creativity, the way on how we get you to look at the world from different perspectives, and perhaps most importantly, to look at things outside the box will actually, again, allow you to gain that versatility that you can actually use regardless of sector. Critical thinking, perhaps relying on argumentation that is based on evidence, science, and reason, is to look at the advantages, the disadvantages of different points of view, different perspectives, different opinions, and how they actually inform the way you go about making decisions. And as I said earlier, perhaps most importantly, I wanted to speak about confidence. We may indeed view confidence from two slightly different perspectives. On the one hand, we may understand it to refer to its more traditional sense as self-assurance on our own abilities. So in other words, we're very confident because we can stand up in front of a big audience and chat without any fear whatsoever, the more traditional sense. But we can also think of confidence as a belief that one can trust or rely on someone or on something. Now, we may assume that becoming more confident through our MBA might refer to the first one, so to that more traditional view of confidence, a self-assurance in our own abilities. Important as this may be, I would actually argue that the latter, so that confidence or trust on someone else, or most importantly, trust on something happening, like the opportunities that the future can bring, is as important, if not more, as our self-assurance. Indeed, it is of little use to be confident about our own abilities if cynicism, if pessimism gets on the way. And it is therefore only when we're optimistic and confident about the future opportunities that being self-assured can bring about, that we can ultimately seize those opportunities. So let us focus on each of these dimensions of confidence. Does the MBA make us confident about our own abilities? In the Manchester MBA, this is perhaps the unintended consequence of our course design, our experiential approach, our admissions process, and ultimately our focus on critical thinking. It is indeed from a position of reasoned argumentation or the assurance that we obtain from relying on empirical evidence that we can become confident in the strength of our persuasion abilities, for instance. Of course, our personality can help here as well, but no matter how quiet or hesitant students were when they started our programs, they tend to be much more confident when they complete the MBA as a result of the journey with us. Many of our students tell us that the MBA has made them a lot more confident to stand their ground in debate, more confident to be ambitious when applying for jobs, more confident to change the direction of their career, more confident to speak to others, more confident about speaking in public, more confident to negotiate remuneration, more confident to have difficult conversations, and more confident sometimes just to simply say no. I occasionally hear from applicants who mention confidence as a motivator for pursuing an MBA, but I actually hear it quoted very, very, very often by students and graduates as one of the key benefits they gained from doing their MBA with us. In any case, this increased confidence is actually most likely to ultimately deliver on the outcomes that motivated most people to pursue an MBA in the first instance altogether. However, I would argue that the second dimension of confidence, as I said earlier, so that trust in others or something happening, like the positive opportunities that uncertainty can bring, is more important than self-assurance in one's ability. So, in short, it is about being confident and optimistic about the future. Coronavirus, AI, automation, trade wars, Brexit, bioengineering, fake news, climate change. It's easy to be pessimistic about the future, isn't it? But with the benefit of hindsight and a critical mindset, we can conclude that we have come through much wars in history, and that technology can play an important role in addressing all of these problems, coronavirus included. There's a lot of opportunity and uncertainty, and it is only those who are optimistic that may be able to seize these opportunities. An MBA should give students a critical mindset and produce the enthusiasm about these future opportunities. Let me now move on to relate how this issues that we've actually discussed relate to the MBAs that we actually offer here in Manchester. And we do offer really 3 key MBAs at Alliance Manchester Business School. Obviously, our full-time MBA, our standard part-time blended learning global MBA. We also have some accelerated pathways for eligible applicants, as I said earlier. And the jointly delivered Kelley-Manchester Part-time Global MBA, which we offer together with the Kelley School of Business at Indiana University in the United States. I will focus on the Global Part-time MBA and the Kelley-Manchester MBA. So, what are the key features of our part-time Global MBA? Well, it's a blended program, and by that I mean that we actually blend both online and face-to-face elements, and that obviously makes it incredibly flexible. The program is offered in its default position as a 2-year program. You can actually complete the program by a mix of coming on campus 6 times over 2 years for a total of around 30 face-to-face days. At the moment during the pandemic, obviously some of those days are having to be offered virtually, right? But we're looking at how we can actually manage that even better. But it's incredibly flexible because you can actually defer the units. We produce it at such we offer it at such a large scale all over the world and every single semester, because we have intakes every January and every July, that it's very, very easy for any of our students to basically defer or postpone or slow down their studies whenever life gets on its way, because you get promotions, which tends to happen quite often with our students, or when life gets on its way, such as, I don't know, disease or illness, or a relative might pass away, or you might get married, whatever it may be. It's actually a very, very holistic program, as I said. So we tend to focus on looking at the overall picture, and we actually try to understand business and management from a rather high-level perspective. And not only we actually cover every single area of business and management, but we also tend to focus a lot on trying to look at the interplay between different areas. So say, for example, rather than looking at operations management and marketing in its most traditional sense, separate and distinct pigeonholes, we actually tend to bring them together to look at the interplay between operations management and marketing, between demand and supply, between consumers and internal organizations, because we think that's really at the heart of the understanding as to how organizations work. Or, for example, the links that exist between accounting and finance, so measuring financial value and creating financial value. Ours, for the reasons I already outlined, is a very, very global program. So not only we actually have people from over 100 nationalities, but we offer it transnationally all over the world. And we actually give you that opportunity to travel to all those different centers so as to look at how business is conducted in different geographies. Ours is a transformational program. So once you finish, you'll be looking at the world from a totally different perspective. And most importantly, as I said, you'll be more confident. And also, as I mentioned, we have accelerated options. So there's accelerated options both for holders of finance professional qualifications, in other words, those who have CIMA, ACCA, CPA, and so on, who gain exemption from our business accounting and finance courses and can actually reduce the length of the program to 18 months. Or for those of you that are particularly senior, people that are already at board level or getting very, very close to board level, very, very substantial experience, where they can actually join our exclusive Global Accelerated MBA, again, being able to complete the program within 18 months, but as part of a closer cohort of individuals that travels to different centers. So rather than doing it all from the Middle East, they come to Manchester as a close cohort, then they go to Dubai to take some of the courses as a close cohort, then they go to China or Hong Kong as a close cohort, then they come back to Manchester to take such a competition, and then they take electives with normal global or standard global MBA students in the rest of the world. So this is really how the program looks like. So the program offers you core disciplines on your first year. So basically, you're actually looking at the principles of operations management, marketing, economics. You're actually looking at accounting and finance. You're actually looking at economics, and the principles of organizational behavior, organizational design, and so on. And you actually do that in a blended format by attending workshop residentials over 3 times in that first year, for a total really of 17 days. And the second year really is when you specialize. So not only you actually then finish strategy and competition by looking at a more traditional course on strategic management, but then you actually select 3 elective units, and then you also do your capstone live business project as a group of individuals, adding to 13 more workshop days. Now, in addition to that, we have plenty of activities which under the umbrella name of MBA Plus, anything from networking events, online career seminars, employability sessions, career guidance, alumni socials, speaker events, alumni groups, and so on, you can avail throughout the program and beyond. And even once you complete the program, we also give you a complimentary post-graduation elective that you can actually take at any of our international centers. So basically a 4th elective that you can actually take in the period of 2 years after you graduate on whatever you actually want to continue with your lifelong journey. Our Kelley-Manchester Global MBA is an MBA. I'm not going to delve too much into detail. That is jointly delivered between ourselves and the Kelley School of Business, as I said, part of Indiana University. And the benefit of it is that because the bits that Kelley offer are fully online, is making it our most flexible program yet. In addition to that, it obviously also allows you to gain 2 MBA qualifications, one from Indiana University in the United States and one from us, the Global MBA from Alliance Manchester Business School. So basically you get 2 MBA parchments. And it's actually very, very interesting if you have a career that don't know where it's going to take you, whether you actually want a US MBA or a UK MBA or both, you really can actually use that as passports to many, many geographies. Some of the examples of electives that we actually offer, you name it, we'll have it. At any one time, we have anywhere between 23, 24, 25 electives. We tend to refresh them very often depending on what students want at that moment in time. But anything from advanced strategic management, international business strategy, if you're looking at strategy. If you like digital, so we have digital economy, we have information systems and digital strategy, or we actually have managing disruptive technologies, or we're actually introducing new electives on blockchain and fintech, electives on platform ecosystem strategy. If you're more into marketing, we have B2B marketing, we have new media marketing. If you're interested in entrepreneurship, we have entrepreneurship and innovation management, venture capital and private equity. Finance, we have strategic financial analysis, investment portfolio management, you name it. Again, we have plenty of electives. In any case, and just before we actually pass it on to a few Q&As, I'll just conclude by re-emphasizing that the MBA as a qualification, be it part-time or full-time, has a very, very, very healthy outlook, particularly in a context of uncertainty as the one that we actually live in now. Because employers value the benefits that graduates can bring to the organization, applicants continue to apply to MBA programs in large numbers all over the world. In fact, in this context of uncertainty and a changing environment, only those MBAs that are actually offering the right skills will be able to thrive in this new world and will be successful in this context of uncertainty. Business schools need to create versatile, global, responsible business leaders by focusing, as I said, on skills including communications, collaboration, creativity, critical thinking, and confidence, and by offering practical, hands-on, and innovative content suitable to the current business environment. We do live in a very uncertain world, and the events that we have experienced over the last few months truly reflect this uncertainty. And indeed as well, how interdependent and global our lives and our careers are. In my opinion, there's actually no better time to be versatile. There's obviously then no better time to get an MBA. So with these words, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to close this session, and I will actually then just pass it on to my colleague William that will actually collate some questions. I hope you can actually see me now on the video, and I'll be happy to answer any questions that you might have on the MBA as a qualification in general, or indeed as well on any specific questions that you may actually have about our specific MBA programs. Thank you.
Fantastic, brilliant. Thank you very much for that, Xavier. Very, very insightful indeed. I think we've got a couple of questions here, so I'll just put them on to you if you don't mind. I think the first one is, what differentiates Manchester to its competition, especially at the moment, with a lot of competitors coming into the distance learning sphere as well? So how does Manchester differentiate itself?
Yeah, we obviously try to differentiate ourselves by the fact that we offer a program that is fully global. That's why we call it the Global MBA. So we have presence all over the world. So it's not that we're actually offering a program from the UK and there might be a few students coming from the Middle East or from Asia. No, we actually have our own hubs all over the world from which we actually service our students. And that allow us also to give you those opportunities to go to those different centers to take the different electives. But that globality doesn't finish on in the fact that we have all those international centers, that we have that network of centers. Also has to do with the makeup of our student population, which is incredibly international. It has also to do with our curriculum. So our curriculum tends to focus on global organizations. So we don't localize our curriculum. We don't tend to speak about Middle Eastern companies, for example, when we're offering workshops to a Middle Eastern audience, or Asian companies when we're speaking to our Asian audience, or to British companies or European companies when we're actually speaking to our British audience. Not at all. Ours is such an international and global program that our curriculum tends to focus on multinationals and problems, if you wish, that happen all throughout the world. And then obviously, ours is also a very global program in that we actually get out of our way to try to make sure that even our faculty are highly international. Starting with myself as program director, I'm not originally from Manchester. I'm originally from Barcelona in Spain. And you would see that in addition to having a considerable number of British professors, as you can imagine, we have plenty of academics that, whilst obviously working here at the Manchester Business School at the University of Manchester here in Manchester, that they actually come from all over the world. We obviously cherry pick our lecturers and our top researchers because we are one of the leading research universities in the world. Also, I think one of the things that really sets us apart from other programs is the reliance on what we actually call the Manchester method. And the Manchester method is basically the approach that we take to teaching and learning. It's a very hands-on approach. And it's a very hands-on approach that is actually based really on three different tenets. First of all, we tend to focus on real problems. We call them wicked problems. So we do not rely, for instance, on giving you a Harvard business case, 30-page case on the reasons for organizational success or organizational failure. Yeah, there's a very strong pedagogical argument, and indeed we actually use them from time to time to use those type of case stories. But ours tends to be quite a different approach. We tend to focus on getting you to understand a wicked problem, an unstructured, a dynamic situation. As an example, I teach economics or strategies, William said at the very beginning. And what I ask students during workshops is to present a case story of one company in relation to another company in the form of a game of interdependence. Basically, we're looking at game theory. And I don't ask them to basically replicate the analysis that they can actually find in a case story. No, I tell them, for example, Starbucks. Can you actually convince us that Starbucks in some game of interdependence and not against another company? Oh, what's the other company? Up to you. How do you establish a near rival? But what geography? Starbucks is competing with a different set of competitors in Dubai than it would be in the United States. It's home ground, absolutely. So you set those parameters. What period of time? The last 5 years, the last 20 years? Completely up to you. Or what information do I use? You find it. So we're actually asking our students to make sense, to order that information, that wicked problem, to make sense of that dynamic, that uncertain world. And that is why our MBA really, really allows you then to make sense of that uncertain world. That's the first one. So we tend to look at those hands-on problems, those wicked problems. Second one is the fact that we tend to rely a lot on group work. So more than 65% of our program assessment is through group work. And that can be difficult. And it creates conflicts. And it creates sometimes a lot of frustration on the part of students. But this is simply trying to mimic what happens in the real business world. How do you go about making yourself heard amongst other team members with different opinions? Oh, but I'm an engineer, and I'm actually having to deal with people that come from a sales background. These people in sales are very, very wishy-washy. I just want an optimal solution as an engineer. Well, isn't that the value of putting people from different walks of life together? Absolutely. And the third one is that it's highly reflective. At every single step of the way, we're going to make you reflect, think about your contributions, for example, to group work, or those of other group members on how your group is succeeding or not, or how it's being effective. So those three key tenets of the Manchester method, remember, we're actually looking at hands-on real problems in business and management. Second, we're looking at group dynamics. And third, it's highly reflective. So I think it's that globality really, and I think it's also the Manchester method that sets us apart. Other students might say that it's flexibility. Absolutely, ours is incredibly flexible, but as an academic director, I tend to focus on those two first. The globality of our program and the very specific teaching and learning approach that we tend to take. Right, I hope that answered your question anyway.
Brilliant, thank you, Xavier. Very, very complete answer there. We have another one here from Amjad, who's asking, what is the university's plan if the COVID restrictions last for longer than expected?
I don't know what we mean by longer than expected, because when this pandemic started back in, particularly here in Manchester, it started different periods of time in different locations. Here in Manchester, we went into lockdown on the 23rd of March, and we all nilly-willy thought that we might be in lockdown for 3-4 months. That's 7 months ago. We're actually in the midst of a second wave. And whilst it looks like Manchester is starting now to slow down in terms of increasing rates, we just don't know how long it's going to be lasting. Now, of course, there's a lot of talk about vaccines, about better treatments, or the fact that we might be in a better position to control our pandemic and the way these infections actually transmit from one to the other. But the quick answer is that we just don't know. And perhaps that was actually the message I was trying to give you as part of today's webinar. The fact that sometimes it's actually a bit pointless to be just over planning in a context of uncertainty. So what we need to make sure of is that we can navigate that uncertainty, that we actually thrive in it. Now, of course, we've gotten a lot better at navigating it ourselves at program level. So very quickly in March, we had to move to online delivery for our workshops. We gave plenty of flexibility to our applicants and students to see if they wanted to defer courses, because we have that flexibility built into our program. That's not a problem whatsoever for us. We've got very, very good at doing so. And our students actually generally are quite happy with the way we're actually navigating in that uncertainty. Now, what we're actually hoping to do as well is looking at how we can work, for example, in the case of Dubai, work with the regulator for higher education. That's the Knowledge and Human Development Agency, the KHDA, to see how we can start teaching you again, or putting you in a room where at least you can actually network with each other, even if we're actually being asked to deliver virtually. That ultimately doesn't depend on us. It depends on the evolution of the pandemic and what regulators in different parts of the world allow us to do. So, for example, in China, all restrictions are gone, and the program is as usual. So it really depends on how it evolves.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Xavier. We'll just take a couple of more. I'm very conscious of time here. There's someone asking, how valuable is the Manchester network, and is it rather regional? Is it focused on regions rather than a global network, or is it really a kind of global entity in itself?
Well, obviously, we have an alumni team that look at our alumni relationships all over the world, and they actually tend to travel all over the world as well to make those relations happening. But in practice, the vast majority of students tend to want to build immediate connections with their local peers. So, for example, the Dubai Center will be incredibly active, for example, at creating those networking opportunities via speaker events, via actual networking events, by having career fairs organized, and by trying to make you link with each other in the most immediate, for most immediate purposes. Now, it goes without saying that whenever students have one specific interest in particular geographies of the world, they might be taking workshops in other parts of the world, or they might actually be then trying to ask our central alumni services, listen, can you actually put me in touch with an alum from the United States? Where in the US? For example, in California or in New York or in Florida, whatever it might be. Or I'm thinking of looking at potentially moving my career to Southeast Asia. Can you pass me along to alumni from that region in a particular industry, even if it's just for an informal chat? And we're normally more than happy to help with that. Our alumni are always happy to help, or most likely are happy to help, particularly when they hear that we're speaking about peer global MBAs.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Xavier. I think we'll just take one more just so that we can stick within the amount of time that we're allowed. But we'll finish off with, could you expand a little more on the practicality of the program? Because obviously we did mention that it's a very practical program.
Yes, the program, and I think perhaps that brings me back to that idea about the Manchester method. Ours is an incredibly practical program. Now, of course, it goes without saying that we're going to be covering a number of frameworks, theories, models, because we need to do that for accreditation purposes, but also because those will actually be very, very important in making you critical thinkers. And because we don't want you just to reinvent the wheel. But we don't teach you theory, we don't teach you models, we don't teach you frameworks for theory's sake, but only in so long as they actually support a better understanding of the world and society that we live in, that you can really, really apply at all times. And as it happens, when we have our workshops tend to focus on whether that is face-to-face or whether that's actually virtually because of the pandemic. It doesn't matter. All our workshops are incredibly practical. Because our program may be, we never put you in classes of more than 30 people, usually a lot less. Why? Because we tend to focus a lot on discussion, on debate. So much of the learning that you will do will actually be part of the online elements of our program, self-study. And it really comes to life via debate, via discussion, via presentations, via exchange of ideas during the workshops, where academics will, in the vast majority of cases, become possibly more moderators or facilitators to discussion rather than transmitters of knowledge. We don't use the workshops just to lecture at you, but to work with you. People come with a very, very, very substantial level of experience. You guys are not undergraduates. You usually are in your mid-30s. That's usually the average of our program. People anywhere between 27 and all the way to the 60s, but the average tends to be mid-30s with substantial experience. Everybody has a lot to give to the program, and everybody wants to keep it very, very practical, starting with myself and our faculty.
Brilliant. Thank you very much for these insights, Xavier, and for answering all these questions. I think that's all we'll have. I think we're running out of time here, Xavier, so I'll have to wrap it up. But thank you very much for this presentation, for answering these questions. That's very much appreciated. I'd just like to let everyone know, for those of you who haven't been in contact with the university yet, and if you do still have questions to ask, and if you still would like to pursue your application for this MBA program, you can get in touch with the university. All you have to do is to go on our website, manchester.ac.ae. You just need to find the programs page, select the MBA program, and submit a callback request. This will assign you to a program counselor who will be in touch with you very shortly to kind of go through your queries as well. For those of you who have already been assigned with a program counselor, you can of course get in contact with them if you still have any sort of questions, and if you want to go through the application process, of course, as they will be able to support you to help you successfully submit your application. And I'd like to remind everyone that the University of Manchester is currently running its early bird discount scheme with the deadline being end of October. So this is a 10% discount on the total tuition fees for those that submit their application before the end of October. So all there is to do is to submit the application before the end of October to avail the early bird discount. So I'd like to remind everyone about that. And with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to thank you all for attending this session. I hope that you have enjoyed it. I hope that it was informative, and we'd really like to thank Xavier Duran as well, our course director, for being here and for presenting this session as well and answering these questions. We really appreciate your time and your presence. And with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, I am wishing you a very good evening to all of you across the region and further out as well. And with that being said, please do keep an eye as well on our events page on the website, as we do regularly have new events there, so keep an eye on that. And yes, with that being said, I'll let you go now. Do have a very good evening and take care. Bye-bye from that.
Thank you. Bye-bye.